For about $2, you can make a sausage with barely any meat in it, and it'll fool every last person at your table. They'll swear it's all pork. It isn't. It's mostly onion, and a few cents of seasoning, and a scrap of meat stretched further than you'd think a scrap of meat could go. And made the right way, it'll keep more than a year on a shelf, with no fridge, no freezer, not 1 watt of power touching it. I'm Wendell. I've been putting food by since before most folks watching this had their first kitchen. 50 years of canning, curing, and drying. And there's a year of dinners on my cellar shelf right now, sitting in the cool and the dark, waiting. I'm no chef. I never claimed to be. I'm just an old hand who's filled a lot of jars and made a lot of mistakes so you won't have to. This sausage comes from a hard time when meat was dearer than gold. The Great Depression. The shelves were bare. $1 had to feed a whole family for a week, and a pound of good pork was a thing you looked at in the butcher's window and walked on past. So folks did what folks have always done when the cupboard's thin. They made a little go a long way. They took 1 cheap scrap of meat and a sack of onions and a fistful of stale bread, and they turned it into supper for a week. The grocery chain would just as soon you forgot how. They do better when you need them every single trip. A man who can make a week of sausage out of $2 and an onion, that man doesn't need them near as much. So stay with me, partner. By the end you'll know the whole of it, what goes in, how to shape it, how to season it so nobody guesses, and what it costs, about $2 for a good batch. And you'll know the one part you cannot get wrong, because if you mean to keep this on a shelf, there's a step that turns it from a good cheap supper into something that can make you sick. Get that part right, and it's a year of dinners. Get it wrong, and it's a hospital bed. So watch it clear through to the end. This last part is a matter of life and death, and I mean that plain. And before we go one step further, a word of caution, because this matters. Putting up meat and low-acid food the wrong way can grow a poison you cannot see, smell, or taste. It's called botulism. So I do it the tested way. A pressure canner, the USDA times, clean jars. Or I dry it hard and proper. Follow the current chart, not just a video, and when in doubt, throw it out. No jar of sausage is worth your life. Now, I'll be straight with you the whole way through, the way an old hand ought to be. I'll tell you which of these old tricks really keep and which are just stories folks tell. Let's start with what most folks get wrong, because it's the whole game. Here's what most folks get wrong. They think a sausage has to be meat. It doesn't. It never did. The old word for what we're making is a filler sausage, and there's no shame in it. It fed half this country through the worst of it. The meat's there for flavor and a little fat. The body of the thing, the bulk that fills your belly. That's the cheap stuff. Onion, bread, a handful of oats. Meat was the seasoning, not the meal. Let me tell you where I learned the heart of this. There was a widow 2 farms over from where I came up. Folks called her the Widow Eleanor. Her man passed early in the bad years and left her with a house full of children and not much else. And that woman fed every one of them clear through the Depression on next to nothing. She'd take a single scrap of pork, fat trimmings, the bits the butcher near gave away, and she'd stretch it across a whole sack of onions and a week of suppers. I asked her once how she did it. She said, "Wendell, you don't feed children with meat. You feed them with onion, and you fool them with meat." I've never forgotten it. 60 cents of pork, a nickel of onion, and 7 children who went to bed full. That's the recipe I'm handing you. So let's lay it out, and I'll give you the real costs as we go, the way they sit at the counter today. The meat. You want about half a pound of the cheapest fatty pork you can find. Pork shoulder trimmings, the fatty end of a butt, even a bit of fatback worked in. Call it $1, $1.25. Some weeks the butcher will hand you fat trim for near nothing if you ask kind. Then the onions. 2 big yellow ones, maybe 3. 30, 40 cents. Then your binder, about a cup and a half of breadcrumbs or rolled oats, whatever's stale in the bread box. A dime's worth, and honest, it's usually bread you'd have thrown out. Salt, pepper, a little sage, a pinch of marjoram if you've got it. Pennies. Add it up, and you're sitting right around $2 for a batch that'll make a dozen good patties or 3-4 feet of links. $2. A week of breakfasts. Now I'll be honest with you on the onion, because this is the trick the whole thing turns on, and most folks botch it. You cannot just chop a raw onion in and call it done. Raw onion in a sausage goes bitter and weepy, and it'll throw so much water it falls apart in the pan. What you do is you cook those onions down first, low and slow in a little of the pork fat, 20-25 minutes, till they go soft and gold and sweet and most of the water's cooked out of them. That's the secret the widow Eleanor knew. Cooked down onion turns sweet and meaty. It stops being onion and starts being, well, it starts tasting like a whole lot more pork than you actually paid for. Let it cool before it ever meets the meat. While that's cooling, you grind or chop your pork fine. If you've got a grinder, run it through. If you don't, a sharp knife and some patience does the same job. It just takes longer, and there's no shame in slow. Then you mix it all together by hand in a big bowl. The pork, the cooled onion, the breadcrumbs or oats, and your seasoning. And here's where I'll save you a batch I ruined myself. The first time I made this, 50 years ago near enough, I didn't season it near hard enough, and I didn't fry off a test piece, and the whole lot came out flat as a dish rag. So do what I learned to do. Mix it, then pinch off a little nugget, fry it in a pan, and taste it. Right then. Before you shape a single one, if it wants more salt, more sage, more pepper, now's when you fix it, not after. That little test patty is the difference between a sausage folks ask for again and one they choke down to be polite. Now, supermarket sausage and the put-it-by-way are two different animals, and it's worth knowing how. The sausage at the store is built to be sold to you fresh this week and bought again next week. It's got water pumped in to weigh more, and it spoils in days, and the day the power's out, it's the first thing in your icebox to turn. The old way, the put-it-by-way, was built to set you free of the store for a season. Same humble meat. But one of them owns your grocery trip, and the other one doesn't. That's the whole difference, and it's a bigger one than it looks. For shaping, you've got two honest roads, and I'll walk you down both. The simplest is patties. Just pat the mix into little cakes, about the size of your palm, half an inch thick. That's it. The depression cook didn't fuss with casings she didn't have. Patties were the everyday way. The other road, if you want proper links, is to stuff the mix into casings. Natural hog casings you can buy salted in a little tub, a couple dollars, and they keep near forever in the fridge packed in salt. You rinse them, slip them on the horn of a stuffer or even a wide funnel, and ease the meat in, twisting off links every 6 inches or so. Don't pack them tight, or they'll burst when they cook. Easy and loose. It takes a little practice. My first links looked like a string of sad little balloons, and I'll not pretend otherwise. Now let me stop here a moment. This next part is the one that changes everything, and it's the one that keeps you safe. Because so far what I've described is a fresh sausage. And a fresh sausage, with cooked onion and bread in it, is a perishable thing. Made fresh, this keeps in the icebox 3-4 days, no longer, and you cook it through to 160 degrees before you eat it. Or you freeze it. And yes, the freezer's a fine thing. I'll not lie to you. It's the easiest way to hold this. But a freezer is a fine thing right up until the power's out for a week. Then it's a box full of spoiled meat. So if you want this on a shelf, with no power, the way the title promises, we have to do something more. And here's where I have to be most honest with you of all. There are 2 real ways to make this keep a year without a fridge, and only 2. The first is to dry it hard, into a sausage like the old country dry sausages. And that takes pink curing salt the right way. Let me name it plain so there's no confusion. Pink curing salt. You'll see it called Prague Powder No. 1 or sodium nitrite cure. It is not your table salt, and it is not pink Himalayan salt. It's dyed pink on purpose so you never mistake it for either. It's the thing that lets cured meat keep without growing botulism, and the ratio is exact and you do not eyeball it. 1 level teaspoon of Prague Powder No. 1 per 5 pounds of meat. That's it, no more. Too little and it won't protect you. Too much and the cure itself is harmful. You weigh your meat and you measure that cure to the gram. And even then, a true dry-cured sausage is hung and dried under controlled cool temperature and humidity for weeks, and that's a craft of its own that I'll give a whole video to another day, because it deserves one and I'll not rush you through it half-told. The second way, and the one I'd point a beginner to, is the pressure canner. You make your sausage, you brown your patties or your bulk meat, you pack them hot into clean jars, and you process them in a pressure canner. Not a water bath. Hear me on that. You cannot water bath can meat. Folks online will show you sealing meat in a boiling pot of water, and I won't do it, and neither should you. That is exactly how you grow the poison. Low-acid food, and meat is low-acid, has to reach the temperature only a pressure canner reaches, around 240 degrees, to be safe on a shelf. The USDA chart will tell you the pressure and the time for your jar size and your altitude. For pints of meat, it's commonly 90 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure, but you follow the current chart for where you live, not my memory and not a video. Done that way, sealed and stored cool and dark, that meat keeps well over a year. That's real. That's the year on a shelf I promised you, and it's the safe road to it. And here's the part I will not let you skip, because it's the one that's killed people who did everything else right. Botulism has no smell. It has no taste. A bad jar can look and smell perfectly fine and still put you in the ground. So you do not trust your nose with low-acid food. You trust the method. If a lid is bulging, if a jar is leaking or weeping or spurting when you open it, if the color's off or it smells sour, you don't taste it to check. You throw it out, jar and all. And you cite the real folks who know this, not me. The USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning, the Ball Blue Book, and the National Center for Home Food Preservation, that's nhafp.uga.edu. Those are the people who tested this 1,000 times so we didn't have to guess. Follow their current charts. Not a video. Not even this one. This one points you to them. Now let me ask you something while those patties rest, because I'm honestly curious. Has your family ever put food up for a hard winter? Did your mother or your grandmother keep a cellar, or a crock, or a shelf of jars? Tell me down in the comments. I read them, and there's more wisdom down there in those comments than in any book I own. Let me give you one more honest word on flavor, because $2 of sausage ought to taste like more than $2. A pinch of dried sage is the classic depression note. It's what makes the brain say breakfast sausage. But the widow Eleanor's own secret was a little grated apple, or a spoon of the onion cooked down extra dark and sweet, almost like a jam. Folded into the mix, it gives a sweetness that tastes downright rich. Costs nothing. Fools everybody. That's the whole spirit of this food. Make a little taste like plenty, and let no one at the table be the wiser. So there it is. $2. A scrap of pork, a sack of onions, a heel of stale bread. Made fresh, it's a week of breakfasts in your icebox. Browned and pressure canned the tested way, it's a year of suppers on a shelf with no power at all. The widow Eleanor fed a houseful of children on exactly this, and went to bed knowing none of them went hungry. That's not a small thing. That, to my mind, is just about everything. Where are you watching from, by the way? I do like knowing how far these old recipes travel. Drop your corner of the world in the comments. It always warms me to see them. Next time, I'll show you what the widow's neighbor did with a single hog and a sack of salt that fed a family clear through to spring. Salt pork, the chuckwagon way, down in its own brine, with not one jar and not 1 watt of power. It's the natural next step after today, and it's a good one. Until next time, keep your cellar cool, keep your jars clean, and remember, the folks who fed a family through the Depression with $2 and no icebox knew things were only just starting to neat again.